times because his policies, that means Democrats, that means blanks, have cast a vote for him. He mentioned the Connecticut governor, a Democrat. So a lot of these things aren't even partisan issues any longer, as much as some of my colleagues would like to frame them that way. These are the common sense issues. These are the issues that common sense New Yorkers believe should be pursued. And if my colleagues across the aisle don't feel the same way, then there's going to be a lot more Republicans in office in the future here in New York State, and that's a great thing. So. I want to call up my good friend, the former leader of Congressman Lawler when he was in the Assembly, my colleague in the Assembly, a fighter for these issues for a very long time, a great leader of his conference, and that is my buddy, Assembly Leader Will Barkley.
I'm tempted to say ditto and just leave the stage. But no, thank you, Leader Ort. It's great to be here with one single voice, and you hear my talking points, you'll realize we really are on the same page. We're able to get our message out more effectively here in Albany. I want to thank the Congressman for organizing this event. As mentioned, he's a former colleague, he's a friend. He's done a tremendous job in Congress. As Leader Ort mentioned, he doesn't come from an easy district. It's no safe seat where Congressman Lawler is. But because he talks common sense issues, because he meets the voters, goes out and understands the voters' needs, he was reelected. And possibly, just possibly, there may be another office in the future for Mike Lawler. I also want to recognize the chairman of our state party who does a great job, Ed Cox. So we just came off an election, and not surprising in that election, the reason we have President Trump, because people are fed up. They're fed up with the cost of living, they're fed up with crime, and they're fed up with the migrant crisis. Now, anyone's elected office knows polls. They know, what you have to say to get reelected. And we've heard it from this governor. She's saying the right things. She's talking about affordability. But as the congressman said, as what Leader Ort said, you can't talk about it and just have rhetoric and not have the policy to back it up. You can't say you're for affordability and then charge New Yorkers $9 to drive in New York City. You can't say you're for affordability and then pass environmental policies that are going to raise utility bills on all New Yorkers. You can't say you're for affordability and then take money from everybody and then give it back to a few people and call it an inflation refund. We need true policies that are going to help put money back in the pockets of New Yorkers and make the cost of living in New York more reasonable. So far, I haven't heard it from the governor. I haven't heard those policies being stated by either of the majorities. Crime. Crime was a big issue in this election, rightfully so. The governor says she's out there fighting crime. You can't say you're fighting crime when you do nothing about bail reform, when you do nothing about raise the age. In fact, you've passed policies and advocate for policies, take parole. You're making the situation worse. And you can't say the subways are safe. You can't say the subways are safe and then have the same day have a tragic time when the person was burned on the subway. In my mind, that's not fighting crime. As Leader Ward talked about, too, the migrant crisis. New Yorkers are concerned about the migrant crisis. We're concerned about it here on the state, spending $5, $6, $7, $8, $12 billion on the migrant crisis. You can't say you're trying to solve the migrant crisis when you're doing policies that we have in New York, doing absolutely nothing about the green light bill that we passed here in New York. So I know our conference, I know the Senate Republicans, I know Congressman Lawler, because we have a record of doing it. We're willing to work in a bipartisan manner. This isn't political. These are common sense. We have common sense solutions to these issues that New Yorkers are most concerned about. So I'm curious what the governor is going to say. We know some of the things she's talked about in her State of the State. We're curious what she's going to say. but ultimately hold her feet to the fire. That's what we're going to do. You can't just talk about it. You can't just, you got to actually walk the walk. You got to pass the policies that are going to help all New Yorkers. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here today at this rally that's organized by Congressman Lawler. I wanted to, fortunately, under this Democratic governor and her predecessors, of exporting jobs and importing energy. Comes to mind, Deputy Leader Generis. He killed 27,000 good Amazon jobs in his district just to please the power in his district, Madam AOC. Governor Cuomo, he has, and we're the only state that has these natural resources, he has banned natural gas development in New York State and the pipelines that would carry good, cheap New York natural gas all around the state and to New England. These are killing jobs. Tens of thousands in Queens, hundreds of thousands in the natural gas industry. Just take a look at Pennsylvania on the other side of the border. We're going to propose something called cap and invest. Normally it's called cap and trade, but I guess they don't like the word trade. So it's cap and invest. And that's going to smother jobs in businesses all throughout the state. It is well known that if that policy had any value at all, it ought to be done on a national level, not in one state, just to prove an ideological point. So that's what we're talking about with the leadership of the other party. I'd like to say a few things about Mike Lawler. I think I've known him longer than just about anyone else here. He was a rising senior when he volunteered to join me as chairman of the McCain campaign in 2008 here in New York State. And right from the get-go, I knew he was a talented individual who really cared about New York State and wanted to do something to improve the situation in New York State. And he joined right after he graduated, he joined the state party. He quickly rose to be my executive director. There's no better, I've never had a better executive director than Mike Lawler. He's extraordinary talent, extraordinary talent. But then to accomplish his goals of really going on to do something for all the problems that he saw as executive director of the party, he decided he would get into helping others run for office. And then he decided, even though it was tough in that assembly district, he decided he'd run for the assembly. And he won that. He won it. And then after we accomplished the good, honest redistricting of congressional districts, he was sitting in his assembly seat and saying, oh, look at that. The special master has drawn a district. I can win that one. But it was a tough district. It's a Democratic district. And let me tell you, he organized it, he worked at it, and he defeated Sean Patrick Maloney, who was heading the DCCC. And that was a huge victory that resonated all around the country. So, Mike, I appreciate you getting us together. I appreciate very much what the leaders have said. The Republican Party's on the move here in New York, and we are going to have a Republican governor after 2026. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman Cox. And with that, any questions, comments, or insults anybody has? Yes, sir. Love the framing there. Look, I love that the MTA put out a report showing 1 week in January and compared that to the average commute for the entire year of 2024. This whole thing is a scam. It is a money grab. It has nothing to do with congestion. It has nothing to do with commute time. It has nothing to do with the environment or safety. The governor needs to raise $1 billion in revenue so they can borrow $15 billion more for the capital program. Do you know the MTA has more debt than 80% of the states in the country? 80% of the states. That is the most incompetent, bloated, mismanaged authority in the country, bar none. It's not even close. So the fact is that if they really wanted to reduce congestion, they would do a few things. Number one, actually make sure the subway is safe to ride. Number two, they would stop clogging up every single road in the city, putting restaurants, bikes, taking up so much of the traffic lanes and actually reducing traffic to single lane. Number three, they would actually sink the light. But the fact is, this was never about that. This is about money. And the MTA loses $700 million a year from people who refuse to pay to ride the subway on buses, on trains, and taxing commuters who, by the way, don't have a one-seat ride. I live in Rockland County. Rockland County does not have a one-seat ride. The MTA has reduced express rail service. We pay $50 million more in taxes a year than services we receive. So yes, there are cops, there are firefighters, there are EMS workers, there are nurses, doctors, teachers who have to commute into the city and drive. They should not be penalized to do that. And if the MTA needs money, they should look no further than the $4 billion they're pissing away on illegal immigrants with free housing, health care, clothing, food, and education in the state budget. Or the $100 million used on welfare for politicians in New York's scam of a taxpayer finance system for political campaigns. Get rid of that. Put that towards the MTA. So there's a lot that can actually be done to address the issue of the MTA's finances, to pay for the capital program, and to address the issue of congestion. But I don't buy this nonsense that was put out showing a one-week comparison to an average commute time for an entire year. That's laughable. So, with respect to the governor, is it her position that if she doesn't get unlimited, she would like it to stay at $10,000? I mean, what an asinine statement she has made. First of all, if the tax bill expires, yes, SALT would go back unlimited. But here's the problem. It would be associated with the single largest tax increase in American history. Rates would go up, and the alternative minimum tax would come back, which would cripple New York. So we have to negotiate in good faith on this issue. I have proposed legislation that would increase the SALT cap to $100,000 for individual, $200,000 for married couples. That would more than cover most everybody in this state. In fact, the only people who it wouldn't cover are the uber wealthy that Kathy Hochul is now proposing to raise a millionaire's tax on. So she doesn't give a crap about taxes. That much is clear. We've seen how much she just continues to throw one tax after the next at people. But the problem is not the cap on SALT. The problem is that Kathy Hochul has increased state spending by $90 billion since she took office as lieutenant governor, and over $61 billion since becoming governor. That is crippling this state. It is the reason we lead the nation in outmigration. People cannot afford to live here. So if Kathy Hochul wanted to do something to actually help New Yorkers, she wouldn't propose more spending in today's state of the state. She would actually propose cutting spending, and she would propose cutting taxes. But that's not what she's going to do, because she is the most inept, incompetent, feckless governor in America, and she knows it. So, with respect to my intentions, obviously I'm looking at it. That's not a secret. I won't make a decision for some time. But the reality of this is very simple. This cannot continue. We cannot continue down this path where New York leads the nation in outmigration, where businesses are shutting down and leaving, leads the nation, the highest tax burden, the worst business climate. New Yorkers are suffering. At the governor's office, by the Senate Majority Leader, by the Speaker of the Assembly, and what they have allowed to happen to this state is shameful. So, we will look at it for sure, and ultimately make a decision sometime this year. But I can tell you this, I will do everything in my power to make sure she is not governor in 2020. Well, look, we're in the 2026 election cycle, so I mean the reality is you haven't seen Kathy Hochul do more than she has in the last few weeks because she's scared. I mean, these photo ops are comical. Taking a selfie on a subway right after a woman is burned alive. This is somebody who said she paused congestion pricing because she went to a diner and somebody informed her that congestion pricing is a problem, so I'm going to pause it, because I want to address the issue of affordability. But immediately after the election, magically, it's no longer an issue, and we're going to jam it through. Her political malfeasance is on full display for everybody every day. But the fact is, obviously, 2026 is just around the corner, and we'll see how it plays out. Yes. Look, we have made significant progress over the last few years. Every election is in and of itself unique. Candidates matter. The message matters. But I have been successful now 3 times in 2-to-1 Democratic districts. Why? Because I show up in every community, because I talk about issues in a common sense way that the average New Yorker can understand as they're trying to make ends meet, as they're going to work, as they're taking care of their families. The fact is, no New Yorker thinks that allowing violent criminals back on the streets to reoffend is good policy. No New Yorker thinks hosing and fleecing taxpayers out of $2,500 annually just for the privilege of commuting to work is good policy. No New Yorker thinks trying in single-family neighborhoods is good policy. The fact is, Kathy Hochul has failed at everything she has done. She just happened to fail up because of the incompetence and corruption of Andrew Cuomo. But the fact is, she has never managed anything, and that much is clear based on how she has handled her job as governor. So, no, New Yorkers are wise. They're smart. We have made significant progress. You have seen Republicans flip seats in Congress, in the state Senate, in the state Assembly. Rome wasn't built in a day, but certainly under Kathy Hochul, Rome is burning, and we need to save it. So, look, the affordability crisis is the biggest issue impacting New Yorkers. Businesses are leaving this state, and even ones that are coming are concerned about the cost of doing business. They're concerned about the burdensome regulations. Over a decade ago, the state Senate Republican Conference did a study on regulations in the state. There was over 1 million business regulations on the books. We need to not only cut state spending, we need to cut the regulatory body across the state. It is stifling innovation, it is stifling business, it is stifling job creation. We need to increase domestic production of energy here in New York, which means you have to lift the moratorium on natural gas extraction. You can mandate electricity for everything, all electric hookups for new buildings, EV mandates. Guess what? 70% of electricity is generated by natural gas. How in God's name are you going to create enough electricity when you are jacking up the demand of electric? You can't. So the reality is you need a coherent energy policy. Yes, we need to build more housing. We're 6.5 million units underbuilt nationwide. I represent one of the highest property tax counties in America, Westchester and Rockland counties. Part of the challenge is there isn't enough housing supply. So we do need housing, but it needs to be done in concert with local municipalities, not a top-down mandate from a safety crisis. People are leaving this state not just because of the affordability crisis, but because of the quality of life. They don't feel safe. That has had a dramatic impact on New York City. Wall Street is leaving. Banks, financial service industry, they're going to Florida, they're going to Texas, they're going to Georgia, they're going to North Carolina. Wall Street is the golden goose that has allowed New York to flourish. We need to reverse that trend. So there is a lot that can and should be done, but you actually need leadership that can effectuate that change. Governor Hochul has proven she cannot. With respect to is paramount. Whether you talk about infrastructure, whether you talk about rail, we need to increase our investments in infrastructure. The federal government has given New York $100 billion. Why is that money sitting in Albany's coffers? Why are we not culverts, sewer, water? When you talk about transit, absolutely we have to invest in it. It is a priority to me because connecting Buffalo to New York City and beyond is critical. We need an economy that is interconnected across the state if we are not only to grow the economy in New York, not only to bring people back, population here, there needs to be integration. Yes? I'm sorry? It's critical. This has been a failure of going back to Bill de Blasio. I mean, Mike Bloomberg was able to clean up the city in part because of the way they were dealing with those that were homeless or dealing with mental illness or drug addiction. And the failure of the city to address that, as well as the failure of the state to make sure that the laws reflect that, has created a crisis in New York City. The fact is, the number one priority of the state has to be to ensure the safety and well-being of every New Yorker. And that requires us to address this scourge of mental health that is causing chaos and destruction on the streets of New York City. So it should be fixed. It should be addressed, and the laws should be changed. So let me ask you a simple question. Who's paying for the free public transit? Who's paying for it? Right, Governor Hochul, while the MTA loses $700 million a year from people who refuse to pay to ride the subway system. They jump the turnstiles, refuse to pay. She now, on top of the MTA payroll tax, on top of the MTA mobility tax, on top of the fees that we pay as property taxpayers towards the MTA, on top of the tolls, on top of the gas, now wants to implement a congestion pricing tax. That's what I'm talking about. So, no, this idea that everything should be free, wouldn't it be lovely if we all lived in such a rosy world? That's not reality. And that's part of the reason New York is in the mess that it's in. So, no, I'm not proposing free transit for everybody. Well, again, it should not be mandated. It should be collaborative. New York State has home rule built into our Constitution. The governor tried to circumvent that, which is why not just Republicans, but even Democrats in the suburbs push back against it. I am on the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee. I unveiled last year a 208-page, 39-provision housing plan from the federal government on what we could do to help incentivize states and localities. We're happy to give that to you so you can review it. But the objective certainly is to build more housing across the country. As I said, we're 6.5 million units underbuilt. The average home value in Westchester County, for instance, has gone from $700,000 to $1.1 million in just 4 years. Why? Because there was a demand. New York City residents were trying to get out of New York City, but there's not enough supply. But I have areas that include the New York City watershed. You can't mandate housing in those areas and where the infrastructure is not available. So there's a lot that needs to be done, but Governor Hochul's harebrained policies are not the way to do it. What do you mean? What in? Yeah. What we're talking about is what is already existing within federal law and federal programs within HUD. We're gonna wrap it up just because I know the conferences have time. Happy to do a sidebar with anybody else after this. Wouldn't this be so much fun?
Michael, great job. Great job. Great job.
It's Mike. We're taking off today.